Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's digital event. We are excited to have Dan Stine joining us today for a look at architectural storytelling through real-time visualization, sketching, and AI. I am joined, of course, today by Dan Stine and Debbie Folk, account manager. I'm Kelsey. I'm the sales operations manager here at ArchVision. Dan is the director of design technology at LakelFlato Architects. Not only is he a registered architect, Dan is also an educator, an author, and an international speaker. He will be bringing a lot of excitement around the artistic craft of architectural storytelling, as well as sharing more about the ASAI conference happening this fall in Tokyo. We'd like to welcome you all to put questions throughout the presentation in the chat. We will follow up the presentation with a Q&A where we will get to all of those questions. So I will turn it over to Dan.
Thanks so much. Let me share my screen. All right, so you can hear me and see my screen all right?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, great. Just want to make sure. So thanks everyone. I'm excited to share this preview of some of the things that I'll be covering at this conference coming up early October in Tokyo. There's a previous webinar with ArchVision if you haven't seen it, with Tom Gastel, the ASAI president. And as I mentioned, this is a sort of a preview of what I'll be covering. The actual presentation there is a workshop that's meant to be hands-on, and this won't be a hands-on presentation. And I still have 3 months to prepare this presentation, so you're getting a really early preview of the general essence of what I will be covering. So Kelsey already covered a few of these things, but I'll just quickly highlight the fact that I have a blog called BIM Chapters. I also write blog posts for Enscape. I'm on the American Institute of Architects Committee on the Environment, and I'm the chair of the IES BIM Standards Committee. So more on that in just a moment. I've written 19 textbooks. One of the newer ones is the one in the upper right, which is SketchUp 2024 for interior designers. It has an entire chapter on Enscape. So a few things here just sort of set the stage of my experience on the topic at hand, architectural storytelling, and then the context of the American Society of Architectural Illustrators. So I have this chapter on Enscape within this new SketchUp book that just came out recently. And then, as I mentioned, I'm the chair of the Illuminating Engineering Society Committee BIM Standards. We came out with a technical memorandum TM3224 last year that comes with a Revit shared parameter file and allows firms, lighting designers, MEP firms, and light fixture manufacturers, excuse me, who make Revit content to create consistent content that can be used interchangeably amongst firms and designers. In that same vein, I also teach a few times a year professional lighting designers how to use professional grade lighting design software add-in. It's a Revit add-in called IllumTools to do point-by-point illuminance calculations for general lighting, emergency lighting, and point-in-time daylighting. In case you're not familiar, LakelFlato, where I work, is a top-ranked architecture firm based in San Antonio, Texas, where I'm located. We also have an office in Austin, and then a few remote folks that work in different locations around the country. Last year, our founding partners, David Lake and Ted Flato, won the AIA Gold Medal Award. In 2019, Architect Magazine ranked the firm the #1 architecture firm in the US. We've won more of the COAT Top 10 awards, which is an AIA award for a project that is both high quality design and high performance. We've won 16 of those total, more than any other firm in the US. And you can see the project photo on the right is of House Zero. This is a 3D printed house in Austin, Texas. In 2022, it won a Time Magazine Best Innovation and Design Award. And it also won the first season of CBS's Architecture by Design. So this is our client was Icon, and they're also the manufacturer of the 3D printing technology. So a little bit about the firm and how it uses uh, visualization and techniques to communicate with the client. Obviously, communicating design intent is a crucial aspect for any designer, and we primarily use Enscape, hand drawing, and physical models. You can see one of the comments here by Brandy Rickles, one of our partners in our learning studio, describing the value that she sees in Enscape in particular. The image on the right is an Enscape rendering that's been modified a bit in Photoshop for like this watercolor aesthetic. And this is a large multi-building project by our urban design studio that's being designed in downtown Austin, Texas right now. It's kind of fun when I walk around the office and see the amount of visualization that's going on at nearly every other desk. I like to snap pictures of people when I see cool stuff on their screens. So there's lots of Enscape going on all the time, all over the office. We don't have any dedicated visualization specialist when it comes to rendering. So everybody does their own graphics and architectural storytelling. And so me presenting this isn't necessarily how I do it for the firm. It's how I support the firm and provide training and support throughout the office. And collectively, we have really nice offerings, I think. And you can comment your thoughts towards the end. And they're not all the same. There's not a specific way to do it within the office. On the right, it's kind of cool. You can see there's a SketchUp model on the Dell tablet, and then on the screen above, it's the Enscape view that's open. And that's a live Enscape view that's been set up to look like it's snowing or in a cold climate environment. And that basically all of our users have an active stylus type device. So both people in this particular slide have a Dell tablet with a detachable keyboard. Some of the newer computers are a 2-in-1 laptop where the screen folds all the way 180 degrees back and then the screen goes into tablet mode. This allows us to do that hand sketching part pretty easily that we're going to talk about later. Of course, those devices have no possible chance of running Revit, SketchUp, Rhino, Enscape. So we actually use this VDI technology strategy where everybody is remoting into a high-powered computer that's on-prem in our server room. And because everybody 100% remotes into a computer, this makes us super uh, fluid and able to move around very easily within the office. In fact, not a single desk in our office has a wired network cable going to it. It has a state-of-the-art Wi-Fi 6 network throughout, and Juan here on the left could just simply unplug that USB-C cable, get up, go to a phone room, a conference room, out into our courtyard that you'll see in a minute, and still have Enscape running, for example. Two of the 19 textbooks that I've written, one of which, by the way, one of the 19 textbooks is the #1 book on Autodesk Revit in North America, but two of them are actually primarily on architectural hand drawing. And so here's one book that I co-authored with Stephen McNeil, a former colleague of mine. I also write blog posts for Enscape for their official blog, usually about one every other month. And so on the right, I guess the title isn't showing up here, but this was a blog post on composing a view in Enscape, understanding the composition of a view and some important things to just stop and think about the view for a minute and just make sure that the corner of something in the foreground isn't perfectly aligned and overlapping, the edge or corner of something beyond, so that it's a little bit harder to just easily see where one volume starts and another one stops, for example. But you can see I incorporated a few of the sketching elements from the hand sketching book. Of course, I plugged the hand sketching book in the blog post, but you might want to go check that out. And just a few examples of some interesting projects. So LakelFlato, a fair amount of our work is single family residential. I think a third or more of our overall practice is single family residential. And this is a rendering. And it's not a rendered to file that could be much higher resolution like 4K. As you can see, this is a screenshot showing the Enscape UI, just to show you the quality of what we see on the screen. The next slide is kind of interesting. This is kind of funny in some ways, but I wanted to impress upon you, in case you're not familiar with Enscape and real-time rendering, how fluid this actually can be on the screen. So again, those two screenshots you saw, people having Enscape on their screen in the office, they have SketchUp, Rhino, Revit open, and then on the other screen or next to it, if they have a single ultrawide, they have Enscape open. So they're getting nearly instant feedback as they're manipulating their design. So it's used for themselves to, architectural storytelling, to yourself, sort of um, validating and testing ideas. And then in front of a client, rather than just putting static images in front of them, I'm going to go ahead and hit play here now. We can actually navigate through the model like this. So, of course, it may be slightly choppy because you're watching this across Zoom. This is playing on my computer at home, streaming to the internet, and then streaming to your device wherever you might be. But you can see two things in particular. One is just the quality and the fluidity of the ability to navigate through the model. And then maybe three or four things, but then there's some high quality textures, glazing, lighting, and then also vegetation. LakelFlato is very well known for integrating our designs into its context and the site around it. So there's just one example of navigating one of our single family homes. And so we do a lot of real-time, high quality, technology-based visualization. But as you can see here, hand sketching is still something that many people do in the office. So here's Matt Morris, one of the artists in our office that's sketching all the time. And we also make models. We have a small building adjacent to our 3-story office building, sort of across our back parking lot. There's a small 1-story structure, which actually is a wood shop with a table saw and a drill press and a bunch of uh, basically tools and wood supplies. to not only make models, but actually make furniture and objects. You'll see a couple of things I'll point out in subsequent slides within our own office remodel. And then we do use technology in an immersive way as well. So in addition to still images and video, we also have the ability to load VR into a Quest 3 headset, so a fully immersive experience. And then on occasion, we've used tools like Calyx Studio Fuser, which has an add-in for Revit that allows, from the best I know, the best quality ability to go from Revit to the Microsoft HoloLens, and that ends up presenting itself as a hologram to the viewer. You can place a QR code on some existing column or an elevator door and gaze at it, and the um, hologram automatically aligns itself at real world scale to that QR code. And then Fuser automatically associates voice commands with every Revit category. So there's some cool things you can just say out loud, like hide furniture or isolate structure. And then you can also group things and give them names before you push it out to the HoloLens, like isolate level 1. It's pretty cool. And recently, well, actually, I'll mention this when in a few minutes. So we're very collaborative. We have these tablets that make us very mobile. You can see on the left here, Michael's working from home, and I'm on the screen there with him on Zoom. And then we also like to draw on everything. So as you all probably are aware, sketch paper all over the office. The tablets that I mentioned in the 2-in-1 laptops with the active stylus screens. All of our conference rooms are set up as Zoom rooms, and every single one of them have 2 displays, and one of them is a touch screen that you see here on both the left and the right. So you can draw on top of anything that's on the screen. It could be on top of a PDF, but it could also be on top of a live Enscape model, or on the right. Lewis is actually sketching on top of a Rhino screen that's showing Climate Studio um, annual daylight autonomy results. So more examples of sketching, and also using boards like Zoom whiteboards to drop in iterations of sketches, so we can start again to work out the story that we're trying to tell with our design solution that we're going to share with the client. Adding a post-it note and being able to use your stylus to draw on top of the rendered image, just to keep track of decisions that are being made, and if somebody's reviewing it and asking another person on the team to make changes, dictating or requesting changes. This is a project that was recently completed in Illinois, just north of Chicago. It's a Passive House certified environmental learning center. And so you can see the Revit model and pretty extensive amount of geometry spread out all over the place that represents the entourage and the vegetation. And then up and to the right of that is the live Enscape view associated with that Revit model. Again, if you're not aware, the Revit model is directly driving the Enscape model or the Enscape scene. So if we move something in Revit, it nearly instantly updates in Enscape. Or if we do that in SketchUp or Rhino, there's no way to like export the SketchUp or the Enscape model in a way that you're working disconnected from what I like to call the single source of truth. And then this next slide's kind of fun. It's just showing a rendered view, and on the right, it wasn't quite done. And of course, the landscaping wasn't finished, but you can see the essence of the project was really captured in the visualization. Now, one other project I want to show before I start getting into um, a little bit of a workflow that some of the folks in our office use. This is a project that we're currently working on with Corgan. It's a $1.6 billion new terminal for the San Antonio International Airport. And this is all being modeled in Revit. It's all in the Autodesk Construction Cloud. And everything you see here, all the entourage and the vegetation and the materials, are all in the live Revit models that the design team are working on in Autodesk Construction Cloud or BIM 360. And we regularly have VR sessions. We had a few early on, both at the airport and at City Hall, and they've liked it so much that now we have one per week, and we're pretty far along in the design, but we're actually able to show the progress weekly. There's a really interesting vegetation and landscaping area that the entire building's set back from the arrivals and departures road, and there's these cool bridges that you walk across to get to the airport. So it provides a little bit of a security buffer, but it also sort of instills again that connection to nature that our firm really likes to integrate into our designs. And then it creates some other interesting opportunities like the baggage claim. There's windows where you can see straight to the outdoors. And then this has some connections to our local region and culture in terms of materials. And this area we call the Paseo, which kind of mimics or not gives a nod to the Riverwalk, which meanders through downtown San Antonio. This is the terminal, has a mass timber roof, lots of great entourage. One of the cool things, well, before I get to the entourage more, here's an example of a proof of concept that we've been working on. And it's such a cool proof of concept that it actually got selected as a presentation earlier this year at the NVIDIA GTC conference in Silicon Valley. So I presented along with somebody from a software company called QuarkXR, and then also somebody from T-Mobile. And what you're seeing here is an Enscape VR experience where the Enscape EXE model, so in Enscape, you can export to an EXE file that has the model, the textures, and the software all baked into one thing. This EXE model is on an Amazon or Microsoft data center server, and it's being streamed over the internet using the optimization provided by NVIDIA Cloud XR. And then it's also using NVIDIA's deep learning super sampling, which is AI upscaling. And so you can see the quality here is quite good in a wireless Quest 3 headset. Of course, the one in the picture there is a Quest 2 headset. It also works on those as well. But we're able to, which is really great considering that technology strategy that I already told you about, where we have these lightweight tablets that can't run VR. So rather than bring in the lightweight tablet and a giant laptop, you could, bring a 5G Wi-Fi router and connect this VR headset to the Wi-Fi router, and then have this really flexible and portable way of delivering a high quality VR experience. These kind of things couldn't possibly be run on the VR headset themselves. There's not enough power. But on the left there, Joe Ben, one of our partners that's working on the airport project, he's actually standing in our dedicated VR space. It just so happens this picture I took of him testing the the streaming version of VR, but just behind that is a dedicated VR space that has a high-powered Alienware computer and a high-powered NVIDIA RTX card. But even that location has a dedicated Wi-Fi router so that the person doing VR is not tethered. They have the ability to spin around in circles. If somebody wants to sit in a chair or somebody's in a wheelchair, they can spin around without getting tangled up in a cord. Um, and then there's a large display on the screen so everybody else can see what that person's seeing. So this is all part of the ability to tell the story about what your design intent is. And these are some examples of showing how it's worked out really well. The interesting thing about, really one last thing about this before I move on, about T-Mobile's involvement is if you're at a client location that has a really good Wi-Fi connection, you could theoretically not have to use T-Mobile. But if you're at a location, a project site, or a client that doesn't have a good internet connection, you can use what's called a 5G router. And so the router connects to, in this POC, a T-Mobile tower, and then the Quest 3 or Quest 2 headset connects like a Wi-Fi connection to that 5G router. And then Quark XR has the ability, based on some technology that T-Mobile developed and recently made available, they have the ability to toggle on this through this API called something called quality on demand or optimization on demand or XR slicing. There's a couple ways of describing it. Generally, it's called quality on demand, which if there's any sort of performance degradation, they have the ability to turn on this special thing that a consumer can't turn on by themselves that basically improves the connection between the consumer and the tower, making something like this more viable. So one of the things that I personally really like about things like the Tool software that I mentioned I teach, Enscape visualization software that we use, it's all tied back to the single source of truth, the BIM. In our case, it's usually a Revit model. Again, sometimes we use SketchUp and sometimes we use Rhino. Almost, pretty much all projects end up in Revit at some point if they're going all the way through to completion. And you can see in the upper left, this is our office in San Antonio, Texas. So the LakelFlato Architects office. This is the second floor and in the upper left corner. And then from that, we can do a live real-time rendering Enscape model. By the way, in our office, all of our computers have are pretty high quality RTX graphics cards. We have RTX Quadro 5000s, A4500s, and then recently we've been buying these new cards, kind of basically proving out what NVIDIA's CEO says every year at the NVIDIA conference. We've provided more power, more performance using less power. So all of our new computers have gone from a 1,000-watt power supply down to a 300-watt power supply, and they're using an NVIDIA RTX 4000 Ada small form factor. And our biggest projects are already on these computers and working really well. And the other interesting thing, one of the reasons that also is possible is not purely the hardware and the chipset, but the sophisticated software that NVIDIA is creating, like deep learning super sampling. So, and the fact that Enscape has embraced this software and hardware, if it detects an NVIDIA RTX series card, Enscape will use the AI upscaling, AI denoising, which is part of the tensor cores. So RTX cards have CUDA cores, RT cores, and tensor cores. The tensor cores are for machine learning and AI, and Enscape actually uses all three of the cores on the chipset. But one last thing is from this same Revit model, then to the right is a view of Tools. And you can see on the desk here, right in front of the keyboard, a reading of 56 foot candles. Because our office was going for and has since achieved WELL Building Platinum certification, we had to do daylight calculations, electric light calculations, and several of those things were verified by a third party independent tester. And so that 56 that you see there on the right was based on the photometry, the fact that they're direct, indirect pendants, and the reflectance values of the various surfaces and the work plane height. And fast forward to the real world, once the project was done, you can put a light meter on the table, which is in alignment with the work plane height, and get the exact same reading, which is pretty cool. Just one quick example of that same view, that space. So there's the Revit model, Enscape, and a simulation environment, and then there's the final finished space. So now I want to get it, unpack our workflow in a little bit more detail, kind of show you to a certain degree how the sausage is made. And this will be the really hands-on part that'll be really fun at the conference in Tokyo. So I like to start with where we're going with this. In this case, we're going all the way to the project being done and being able to look at the final space. This is our remodeled office in downtown San Antonio. And this was one of the illustrations that we created for that space before any of the finishes were added or the furniture was put in place. It's an existing building, obviously, so some of these pieces were obviously already there, the structure, and we reused some of the doors and glazing. But what you have here is an Enscape rendering where we've adjusted the saturation and the color temperature. And then we've also taken that final rendering and sketched over it just to give it a different layer of authenticity and uniqueness that some of our designers, being largely a design first firm, really uh, want to do to convey our design to clients. So now that you've seen the sort of the end product and the end presentation product, we're going to back all the way up and just look at this kind of unfiltered kind of normal view that you would see in Revit, right? Just a shaded view, and we see different patterns showing up that aren't really meant to be seen by anybody but somebody working in the Revit model. You can see a section box was cut just to give it a little bit more dramatic edge and ability to uh, trace the outline of the shape of the beams. And if before we even get into Enscape, I thought it'd be interesting for you to be aware, if you're not already, some of the settings just in Revit itself. So here I'm in a hidden line view, and you can see where the red arrow is in the middle of the screen. There's actually sort of a jagged, little bit of a jagged line. And so if you'll notice when I go to the next slide, I'm going to turn on two extra settings. I turned on smooth lines with anti-aliasing, which is a view by view setting in Revit. In Revit's options dialog, there's a place to turn it on globally, but it's not recommended due to some of the performance hit you might experience, especially if you're working on a $1.6 billion airport with a lot of stuff in the model. And then I also turned on show ambient shadows, which is different than show the shadows from the sun. This is tending to ground things and give the space depth. So sometimes just doing those two things can create a nice drawing or presentation without having to get too much further into the weeds, especially if this is something that you're doing early on and you're iterating a lot. So the line smoothed itself out quite a bit. So I'm going to go back and forth. Also got a little bit heavier in weight, but you can see it's pretty obvious when you're looking at it on the screen that some angle, all the angled lines got quite a bit smoother because of the anti-aliasing setting. There's another setting down below with the background. If you happen to be looking out a window in one of these views, you could have a gradient background from the horizon up, or some additional things you can do there. But there's just wanted to highlight that real quick before we move on. So next, we're going to open that same view in Enscape. And as you already saw, some of our visualizations and architectural storytelling are using realistic looking images. And that some, depending on the project and the client and the context, that might be fine. For our own office remodel, we actually did a little bit of both, just because we were presenting this and submitted it for a couple of rendering competitions just for fun. But you can see it just going straight into Enscape, it pretty much matches this view that we were just looking at. I zoomed in just a little bit, so we're not seeing as much of the basement as you see in Revit here, as you see right here in Enscape, but you can still see the basement down there. But if I go back a couple, notice how little, well, let me go all the way back to the finished one. So you can tell where you only see a little bit of the top of this drawing drawer cabinet. And and we're also seeing a little bit of the side of the center beam. And if I go back to Enscape at the moment, we're pretty high in the air. We can see a lot of the top of that drawer cabinet. We don't see any of the side of the beam. So you can just kind of file that away for a minute. If we move ourselves down, then we have to look up. Otherwise, we wouldn't see the edge of the floor above, which was part of our presentation. So now that we did that, though, we're actually pretty distorted as we look up, right? We starting to get this fairly intense fisheye view of this project. By the way, I also basically calculated what the professional photographer used for the millimeter of their lens and converted that to degrees. So in this case, I was just trying to get the same exact angle as the professional photographer's camera, which that can range. Sometimes they'll use 30 millimeter, sometimes they'll use 50 millimeter, depending on the space and the context. But anyways, this currently is set to perspective, and the field of view is set to 85 degrees. Now I'm going to go to the next slide, and you'll notice that I switched perspective to 2-point. So now the edges, all the vertical lines are truly vertical. So it's a 2-point perspective. And then the next thing, to get it to look like the earlier image that I was showing that sketched over the top of, we don't really want it maybe always to look photorealistic. So in that case, we can go ahead and start playing with the two primary settings to get this effect, would be saturation and color temperature. We could also turn on or off the auto contrast. So in this case, I turned it on, but you could turn it off and adjust the highlights and shadows separately if you wanted to on the main tab. So what you're seeing here on this dialog is an Enscape settings dialog. Well, most of the effects are completely turned off. We don't need any of those. And then on the main tab, there's also the auto exposure setting that you might want to adjust for something like this. And in this particular case, right, we're working on a still static image, where we could theoretically be moving through this, but I already showed you an image that we sketched over the top of, and clearly that's a static image that's presented. So now once this image is saved out, we could crop it down. We had to back up, I'm going to go back one slide again. We had to back up far enough away so that when we moved to the right, so that we could see part of this beam. we needed to still see this wall where it gets cut on the right. And so to be back far enough, and I mean on the left. So to be back far enough and then see this wall on the left, we end up seeing a lot of extra stuff that was um, cropped by the section box on the right. But in the next slide, I've cropped all that extra stuff out, so we're kind of narrowing things down to what the final view is that we wanted. And then we just fast forward, we might take that image into Photoshop so that we can erase some of the make sort of a shrink wrap version of this view and then sketch over the top of it. We have a couple of different programs that are used in the office, and of course, some of them have the ability to draw a straight line. You pick one point and then you move your cursor around and then click, and it'll draw a straight line between those points. Those same programs, though, can also draw nice sketchy lines like you see for the people and some vegetation. So this just adds a little extra layer to the presentation that makes it look a little bit more lively. It can come across as many of us have heard this before. Sometimes those really nicely rendered images impress upon a client that the design is done and nothing can change. So doing a desaturated, sketched over view like this is maybe a little bit more approachable to the client so that they know that the design's not locked in. Obviously, that's something that we could and should communicate as a designer if we're doing the more realistic views. So to dovetail in some things related to AI for a minute, this is kind of fun. So the upper left image is where I left off in the process, our step-by-step process. On the right is the sketched overview, the final one that Evan Morris in our office actually prepared. But for fun, I took these two images and dropped them into ChatGPT, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a few minutes, but has a much more sophisticated capability of creating images now than it did just 3 months ago. And so I asked it to modify the new image to have a hand sketched overlay like the second image. And that's all I said. It was a pretty simple prompt. And what came out was what you see below. So it's maybe has some areas that could be better, but as a first test, this wasn't me trying it 20 times and then just showing you the best one in this presentation. This is literally the first attempt to do this, and what came out below is really pretty good. And it is, I should have done something to the base image to make something like noticeably different. The only thing that's really noticeably different is in this conference room, you can see Steve Rake, one of our partners, actually sitting there. In the right, he's not sitting there. So the final presentation that we created in the past for the actual project. But down here in the sketched version, you can see there's a person sitting there. So it basically did use the image on the left to do the sketch over, but match the style of the second image, which is pretty cool. So here's a little bit closer version of it. So Enscape itself has some new settings. I haven't actually seen anybody in our office use these. They may be, and I just haven't seen it yet. But the last couple of versions of Enscape now have a couple of new modes. So where we used to just have realistic mode and white mode and basically a light levels mode, we now have watercolor. And so here I've adjusted a few settings. Once you select watercolor that you can see over here on the left, there's some options below here that present themselves. Basically, they're settings you only see when it's set to watercolor because they're only relevant to watercolor. So color gradient, surface detail, bleeding effect. Do you want the glass to still be transparent? So because that's checked, I can see through the glass and see the stairs in the background and the exit sign. So it's pretty nice. Might not be for everybody, but this is not a bad effect or result in my opinion. The next example is sketch mode. And interesting with sketch mode, there's a couple of sub options for pencil, pen, and colored pencil. And in fact, I think it would have been better, maybe they'll add this in the future, is if when you click the mode drop down, there's actually little check boxes that you could pick more than one. Because I think it would be really nice to have this watercolor mode with one of these sketch modes. Notice how there's jitter setting and extend lines. So extend lines is slightly turned on. One of the problems with extend lines is just all the lines extend. So if you try and crank it up too much to get the effect, like we were showing when the hand drawing coming off the beams, all the lines for this wood ceiling treatment end up extending in a little bit more of an intense way. So this is set to pencil. And then also under sketch is this colored pencil option, which is not bad. And then there's finally the pen option. So pencil, pen, and colored pencil. And you can, again, adjust the outlines, the jitter, the extend, if glass is transparent or not. There's a hatched shadows option, and I didn't show that because for this interior scene, it's just hatching everywhere and it's a little too much. But here's another view in the same lobby looking the other way. So notice the sofa on the right and the custom art installed above the sofa on the wall. Here's a another view. The table on the left here was made by some folks in our office in our wood shop. Here's the presentation view. So I'll go back for 1 second. So you can see the two tables. They're basically both collaboration spaces, except for the one on the right here actually has a screen on the wall. And this is kind of cool. It's also set up with the Zoom Room technology. So without a Zoom meeting being created on your tablet or two-in-one laptop, you can open your Zoom app, and in the upper right corner of the screen, which if it's not showing content from your device, it's doing like this slideshow and office-wide information scrolling through the screen. So on your laptop, you plug in that code, and now you're wirelessly sharing. So our conference rooms and then these little huddle spaces have never, ever in the almost 2 years that we've been in the office now had a HDMI cable or a USB-C cable. So wireless at the desks, right? No network cable, wireless VR, wireless conference rooms, no HDMI or USB-C cables. Pretty cool. So here's that lobby again that we were just looking at. So the sofa looks obviously a little different there, what we ended up buying, but the art was pretty close. And the sketch over, there's the recessed light can lights. There's a cone, expressing the direction of light coming out. And on the left here is actually a photorealistic Enscape rendered file. And then on the right is the real thing, the actual piece of art that we got from a local artist, the sofa and the table. So different, but the essence is the same. And another thing I wanted to point out here that's kind of cool, in this Revit model, we actually, before the construction started during the design, we took a photograph of this interior wall, and then outside we took a photograph of that building across the street. And they were both mapped as custom Revit materials to the surface of those objects to make this brick look super realistic, because there's literally some sort of weld plate on the wall there and in real life, and it shows up here as well. Here is this really nice courtyard that we have. This actually used to be a one-story parking garage for I think 16 or 18 cars, and the roof was deconstructed and the walls were left in place. But now we have this really nice outdoor space to hang out in, and the Wi-Fi there's a Wi-Fi router or access point out here, so everybody can grab their tablets and come sit out here under those fans in the shade, even when it's relatively hot out. So now I'm going to switch gears from that project for a minute and talk about AI, a couple of AI related things that's kind of fun. So both my Revit 2025 books and my Revit 2026 books used AI to generate the covers. For the 2025 books, I used Veris, which is now part of Chaos, the same people who make Enscape. And Veris actually presents itself in Enscape 4.7, which is pretty cool. And then on the right, I actually used just 2 months ago, I made the new image creation tool in ChatGPT. So I decided to mix it up a little bit and ask for snow on 3 of the 4 images. And here's an example of the actual Revit model. So I just screenshotted a shaded view from Revit and fed that into ChatGPT. You can see it's far from perfect, which makes it a little harder when you're going to try and use this in practice and show clients something, but still has a lot of value right now for, coming up with ideas and idea boards and whatnot. But you can see the garage door disappeared over here on the rendered view. Here's again, the shaded view from inside the interior design Revit model. And I dropped it in a chat GPT, and then you can see my prompt here. And this is the high quality rendered view that became the cover of the book. So it went from this on the left in Revit to this on the right in ChatGPT, which then became the cover of the book. Again, the problem is once you want to start making tweaks, or you on the left here, you can see I had some explicit materials for flooring that essentially got lost. So there's a little bit of fine grain control once you start going down this path. But generally speaking, it looks great, and it's obviously only going to get better as time goes on. Here's one more example. This is that Environmental Learning Center just north of Chicago. On the left is one of our rendered views. I dropped it in a chat GPT and said, change the brown siding to horizontal hunter green wood siding. And whenever ChatGPT makes an image, it essentially has to remake the whole thing. So you can see the perspective and the proportions changed a little bit, which is obviously not great. In fact, on the left, this is a screened in porch as well. And on the right, it sort of looks like glass. But with a more careful prompt, and again, with time, as this gets more sophisticated, we'll be just talking to our computers and creating designs before we know it, I'm sure. And then I have these last few slides if I have time, and I really don't see any questions, so I'm just going to fill out the time. If anybody has some questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat, but I'll just go through my last few slides here. I only have like 5 left, but a couple of tips and tricks if you're using Revit using Revit and anything, like even Revit's own rendering engine. In Revit's options dialog, you can specify the path to textures. This is super important if you're moving a project from a server to a local computer or taking it on the road. Revit needs to know where the textures are if it can't find them in their original spot. Kind of fun little Easter egg right below that is a ArchVision content manager location. This hasn't been a necessary thing in several years, but Autodesk hasn't removed it. But at one point, this is where you'd set up the RPC content manager. Now this is all done in the cloud via Avail and other much more sophisticated things, but this is a little vestige that hasn't been taken out of Revit yet. Custom textures are super important. In the lower left, you can see that LakelFlato has a custom material library with a bunch of really high quality woods and stones that we're able to use. And of course, we may have to make new ones all the time because we're always doing new and different things. In the project here, you can see the custom material for the existing stone tile in the lobby. There's some other textures. Here's the picture of that building across the street. A piece of art that was put on the wall. We have tons of custom assets, and we make some of these on our own by using software that is on your iPhone, or I think maybe it works on Android. But Polycam allows you to scan a person. So on the right here is my colleague Miguel, and I scanned him, and now he's showing up all over in our airport project as custom entourage. I'm in here a couple of times. I'm this teal shirt with a camera and this black shirt with my hands doing some weird gesture. The partner I mentioned was in the conference room, Steve Rake. He's up here. And then we have a ton of plants. So this is kind of fun. Our BIM manager, Steve Campbell, and I spent one day at my house. I have over 300 potted plants in my house. And we set each one of them in my garage one at a time, ran Polycam around it, decimated it to optimize it to reduce polygons in Blender, and then created custom Enscape assets that everybody in our firm can use. Um, there's some interesting on the Enscape blog. There's a specific blog post I wrote about creating realistic looking glass. And so this shows how to set up the visual light transparency, the glass, the reflectance value, and the glass color. And then it also talks a little bit about um, anything from this 4% all the way to 0. This is actually like 50% all the way to 0 on the Revit material, or I'm sorry, the Enscape slider for reflectance. Enscape knows that there's glass isn't 0 and it's not 100. 100 would be, completely reflective like a mirror. So 100 is 12% visual light transmittance, and 50 and below is 4% visual light transmittance. And then this is my last slide. This is kind of fun. This shows all the different types of appearance assets. These are the different fundamental types of materials you can create in Revit. Most people are using generic most of the time, and interestingly enough, it has the most flexibility, as you can see. But then some of these other ones are physically based materials or Revit's advanced materials, which are supposed to have some of those smarts built into it. On the right here, you can see the generic option and all of those things that were checked over here. And then that's it. A little sketch in the background of a duplex I used to live in and own back in Minnesota. That's also in my sketchbook, one of my hand drawing books. So that's all I have for you all. Looks like I used my time pretty wisely, and there are no questions came in. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much too, Dan. That was amazing. So, yeah, I do not see that we had any questions come through in the chat. I did put our email in there. So if you have any questions after today's event, want to learn again about any of the products that he was referring to, please send us a quick email. And I did drop the link also to the ASAI conference, so you all can check that out. And unless anybody else had anything to chime in at the last second there, I'd just like to say thank you so much again, and we look forward to having you back.
Thanks.
All right, everybody have a great day.